Stay with this story because, as we indicated to you a little earlier, the Johannesburg Safety and Security member of the Mayoral Committee, Dr. Mgcini Tshwaku, believes that poor workmanship could be behind the collapse. Let's get some perspective now on what could have led to this disaster. We're joined by Stellenbosch University's structural and civil engineering professor, Richard Walls. Professor, thank you very much for your time and patience. I did try to get as much information as we possibly can before coming to you, so hoping that you would have at least heard some of what I asked my colleague. What questions should we be asking of whom?
Good evening. Good evening to the viewers. Firstly, condolences from Stellenbosch University to the families who've lost loved ones. And now the investigation is going to have to begin, or probably already underway in some level of form, looking at what happened. Details are very limited at the moment. I've only seen one photo showing inside. It looks like it could be a precast hollow core slab on a structural steel flooring forming some sort of single or double story mezzanine. And so they're going to have to figure out now what, when did the collapse? Also, there's notes about construction, but I can't quite work out now if this had been completed and the other parts of the building were under construction, or if the floors that collapsed them were under the construction themselves. Because in the photo online, I don't see any scaffolding there supporting the slabs. But as I said, it's very limited information available at the moment.
Yeah. A little earlier, the MEC was briefing members of the media, and he makes the comment that just based on what he sees with his naked eye, he can tell that there was shoddy workmanship and that the structural engineer will have to answer to some of the questions here. Who exactly is in charge of a construction site of this size when construction work is on the go?
So what will happen is, as I said, with limited information being known, there may have been an architect that produced the general layouts, but then a structural engineer would have taken those and converted them into construction drawings, specifying sizes of slabs, amount of steel, beam, column positions. That then gets issued to the contractor, and the contractor then undertakes the construction works in accordance with the engineer's drawings. During that process, the engineer should be on site inspecting the works at regular levels, but also then on site the contractor will be responsible for health and safety. So it's really going to depend on what's gone wrong. So we can't jump to conclusions and point fingers yet, because it could be a design fault, it could be a construction fault. As if the MMC is correct, perhaps there is substandard workmanship, but we really don't know. And also you have to be very careful when you come to a collapsed building, because you don't know what went first. And so that the investigative team will have to go back to look at what was the real cause of failure, because once everything is lying on the ground, you're not sure if that is what caused failure or that is what followed the ignition, or followed the failure, once collapse was initiated.
You speak about health and safety. One of the workers who spoke to our colleague, but on condition of anonymity, says that when this incident occurred, the structural engineer was not on site, nor was health and safety. That's how he referred to, I suppose, these two individuals. Are they supposed to be there all of the time, or can they be away for a day knowing that someone else is in charge of the site?
So normally your structural engineer will only come at intervals, sometimes once a week. It depends on the amount of work being done. However, there should always be someone on site who's the designated authority in terms of ensuring health and safety. So there should have been an official, possibly from the contractor. Otherwise, they may have had a separate safety officer. But once again, it's very difficult to know the extent of construction works and what was happening. But yes, ultimately, there should have been safety plans in place to ensure this. Once again, it comes back to to what went wrong. You may have had a safety officer on site, but if it was a structural failure, the safety officer wouldn't necessarily have seen that coming. However, what we would need to know was there signs of structural collapse? Structural distress. Were there beams deflecting? Were there cracks appearing in slabs? Was there evidence that this was coming? Or they will be looking for, was there a defect in the design? Was there some sort of flaw that led to a sudden collapse? Normally, sudden collapses is more a shear type failure. If there was load-bearing brickwork which suddenly buckled, connection failure. There's a variety of failure mechanisms that can cause a sort of sudden collapse that people would not necessarily have seen coming.
Yeah. Finally, as I let you go, Professor, with investigations of this kind, the MMC has already declared that such an investigation will take place. I know of two industry bodies when it comes to construction. There is the NHBRC and then there is the CIDB. This was a warehouse that was being constructed. Which of these two are going to possibly be involved in terms of unearthing what happened and who's to be held responsible?
So once again, it's difficult because I don't know the extent of the works being done and the nature of, was this an extension? Was it small works? You'll definitely find the Engineering Council of South Africa involved. That's not even a question. I'm pretty sure they're already even getting teams on site. They respond very quickly and often very efficiently to these sorts of incidents. There may also be Department of Labour. Depends on what happens. We may even have a South African Police Service investigation, well, I assume with the deaths. So we're going to have multiple bodies involved. Who has started and who's going to be getting involved in the near future, I'm not sure. But EXA is definitely going to be playing a part in the processes that follow. But once again, the contractor will have to find out what is done then, and then what was occurring on site. What was the client or the owner of the building aware of, not aware of? What were they doing? All those things will need to be verified because it's quite speculative at the moment.
All right. Final question. This is not the first kind of its collapse in South Africa. Not too long ago, you'll remember the George building collapse. This was an apartment block, 5-story building. It collapses, 34 people were killed. A report has since come out, and the understanding is that it now sits with the Premier of the Western Cape, Alan Winde, who was quoted recently as saying, "I can now confirm that the police have completed their investigation into all aspects of the disaster, including the peer review report that we handed to the police early last year." Still, I'm not so sure if anyone has been held accountable by law enforcement. How long are these things supposed to take in order to see people who may have done something wrong go to jail?
The sad truth is often these are very long, drawn-out battles. I've heard of cases going 5, 7, 10 years, unfortunately. So when justice is delayed, yes, then it's a major problem, and the people who may need to be brought to justice are potentially not. I can't comment on where George is specifically now, but as I said, by all standards, having all the investigations done in a year, compared to some other disasters, that's actually relatively quick. If you look overseas at some terrible tragedies, it's been sort of 7, 10 years sometimes in some incidents, and they still haven't reached the courts. So, but I do hope those processes are accelerated so we can see the truth come out sooner rather than later.
Professor, thank you very much indeed for your time. Richard Walls is the professor at Stellenbosch University in the Structural and Civil Engineering faculty. Thanks indeed for your time and insights. All right.